10 fruits, 10 patients, 90 days, and the result from patient number 4 made me pull up her lab work and read it 3 times because I genuinely thought the lab made a mistake. I'm Dr. May Anderson, and for the last few months I ran something I've never done before in 15 years of practice. I didn't just tell my patients eat more fruit and hope for the best. I picked 10 specific fruits, gave each one to a different patient under controlled conditions, tracked their blood sugar before and after with their own glucose meters, and wrote down everything. Same portion sizes, same time of day, same tracking, no guessing. And I have to be honest with you, I expected some surprises. That's the whole point of running something like this instead of just repeating what I read in a textbook years ago. But I did not expect what happened with patient number 4. That result is coming, and when you see it, you'll understand why I almost didn't believe my own data. But before I get there, I want to walk you through exactly what I did, fruit by fruit, patient by patient, because the order I'm about to give you is not off some chart I found online, it's what actually happened, in real people, in real time. And some of what I found is going to contradict what you've probably been told, maybe even what I've told patients myself in years past. So let me set the stage properly because I think the details actually matter here. My patients in this test ranged from 58 to 74 years old. All of them had type 2 diabetes or prediabetes. A1Cs ranging from 6.9 all the way up to 8.4. Some had been managing this for 2 years, some for over a decade. None of them were athletes. None of them were on some extreme diet. None of them had perfect willpower or unlimited time to meal prep. These are regular people, eating regular food, trying to get a number on a lab report to come down, the same way you probably are. Here's the rule I gave every single one of them. Eat this fruit, this specific portion, at this specific time, for 1 to 2 weeks, and check your blood sugar before eating, and then 1 hour and 2 hours after. No juicing, no blending. Just the fruit, whole, exactly as nature made it. I wanted to see the real, unfiltered response. Not a lab study on 20 college students in perfect metabolic health. Real people, in their 60s and 70s, in their own kitchens, with their own coffee makers running in the background and their own grandkids probably calling in the middle of it. And before I go further, if you're the kind of person who likes seeing real experiments instead of just being told what to believe, hit subscribe now because I'm going to be running more of these patient trials and I don't want you to miss the next one. It genuinely changes how I think about my own recommendations every time we do this, and I'd rather you be along for that process than just catching the highlight reel months later. Okay, let's talk about why fruit is so confusing in the first place, because I need you to understand the mechanism before the results are going to make any sense to you. Fruit sugar is mostly fructose, and fructose doesn't behave like the glucose from bread or rice. Glucose goes pretty directly into your bloodstream. Fructose takes a detour. It goes to your liver first. Now, in small amounts, with the fiber still intact, your liver handles that fructose just fine. No spike, no drama. Your body was actually built to process fruit this way for most of human history. But when that fiber is missing, when the fruit is juiced, blended, or naturally very low in fiber to begin with, that fructose floods the liver all at once. And the liver, when it's overwhelmed like that, does something you don't want. It starts converting that fructose directly into fat, and it can trigger something called hepatic insulin resistance. Your liver essentially starts ignoring insulin's signal. And that's when you see your fasting blood sugar creep up even when you haven't eaten anything in 12 hours. Even while you're asleep, which is the part that confuses people the most because they did everything right the day before and still wake up to a high number. So it's never really about the sugar content alone. It's about the fiber that surrounds that sugar, the polyphenols in the fruit, and how fast that sugar hits your bloodstream. A fruit with a strong fiber structure slows everything down, almost like a speed bump. A fruit without that protection hits your system almost like a can of soda would, sugar and all, with nothing standing in the way. Keep that mechanism in your head because it's going to explain everything you're about to see, especially why 2 fruits with nearly identical sugar content can produce wildly different results in the same person. Let's start at the bottom. Fruit number 10 in my test, and honestly, the one I was most nervous to give to a patient, was watermelon. My patient here, I'll call her Carol, 66 years old, loves watermelon, eats it all summer, told me she considers it one of her safe foods because it's mostly water. I gave her a cup and a half on an empty stomach, first thing in the morning, nothing else. Her blood sugar 1 hour later had jumped nearly 60 points. I'll admit, even I raised an eyebrow at that one, because watermelon's reputation is so squeaky clean. Watermelon's glycemic index sits around 72. Which technically puts it above white bread. But here's what people miss. The glycemic load per bite is actually low because watermelon is almost entirely water, so a small amount doesn't carry much carbohydrate at all. The problem isn't a small slice, the problem is how much people actually eat, and when they eat it. On an empty stomach, with nothing to slow it down, a couple of cups is close to drinking sugar water. So the second week, I had Carol eat the exact same portion, but after her breakfast, after eggs and turkey bacon, her 1 hour spike was cut by more than half. Same fruit, same amount, completely different result, just from moving it after protein instead of eating it alone on an empty stomach. Number 9 was pineapple, and this one surprised my patient more than it surprised me. His name, I'll call him Frank, 71, retired contractor. The kind of guy who reads every health article his son sends him. Frank actually thought pineapple was one of the safe fruits because he'd read about the enzyme in it, bromelain, and assumed anything with a fancy-sounding enzyme must be good for him across the board. 1 cup of pineapple chunks has over 16 grams of sugar and only about 2 grams of fiber. That ratio, high sugar, low fiber, is exactly the combination that overwhelms the liver I just described. Frank's post-meal glucose response was one of the sharpest spikes in the entire experiment, and when I showed him the number, he was genuinely stunned because in his mind, that enzyme should have been protecting him. Bromelain is genuinely good for inflammation and digestion. It does nothing to slow down glucose absorption. 2 completely different systems in the body, and people conflate them because the word enzyme sounds inherently healthy, no matter what it's actually doing. Number 8 was mango, and honestly, this is the one that concerned me the most going in because I already suspected the sugar load was going to be a problem before we even started. 1 whole mango can carry over 45 grams of sugar. That's more than a can of soda. My patient here, a woman I'll call Linda, 62 years old, ate a full mango for what she called her healthy breakfast swap, after cutting out toast on her own initiative, proud of the change she'd made. Her fasting numbers over that week actually went up slightly, not down, because she was consistently taking in the carb equivalent of 2 slices of white bread in one sitting every single morning, without realizing that's essentially what she'd swapped one problem for another. When we cut her down to half a mango, eaten after her protein instead of before, the numbers stabilized almost immediately, and she told me she genuinely hadn't noticed a difference in how full or satisfied she felt. Number 7 was grapes, and this is where the portion trap really showed itself. My patient, I'll call him Robert, 74, told me flat out, "Doc, I only eat a small bowl." When I actually had him count them out in front of me, that small bowl was 52 grapes. 52 grapes works out to somewhere around 36 grams of sugar. That's close to 9 teaspoons of table sugar from fruit that people assume is basically harmless because there's no wrapper, no obvious sugar listed on a label staring back at them. Grapes are small, sweet, no peel, no pit, nothing to slow you down. So you outpace your own sense of fullness before your brain even registers what happened. Interestingly, the skin of the grape actually contains resveratrol, which is good for the cardiovascular system, but the flesh and juice inside are close to pure fructose. So we brought Robert down to 10 grapes, eaten after a protein-based meal, and his numbers were dramatically more stable, though he did joke that 10 grapes felt like a personal insult the first few days. Number 6 was dried fruit, specifically raisins, because 2 of my patients were using them as a healthy snack mixed into trail mix they kept in the car for long drives. A quarter cup of raisins carries close to 29 grams of sugar, and because the water's been removed, you can eat a huge volume without ever feeling full. The fiber is technically still there, but the sugar-to-fiber ratio is so extreme it simply can't keep up. Both patients showed noticeably elevated post-snack readings, and one of them, this is important, was also on blood thinners, and dried fruit, especially some dried berries and cranberries, can actually interact with those medications and affect how they work. If that's you, please talk to your doctor before adding concentrated dried fruit into your routine, because that's not something to adjust on your own. Now, before we get into the top 5, because this is where things get genuinely interesting, if you've been nodding along thinking, wait, I do that exact mistake, I want you to drop a comment right now telling me which fruit on this list is your go-to. I read every single one, and honestly, it shapes which patient story I dig into for the next video. I've had comments before that led me to entire new experiments I hadn't even considered running. Alright, number 5. This one has a twist that changed how I look at an entire category of fruit, bananas. My patient here, I'll call her Diane, 69 years old, told me point blank her doctor had told her years ago to just stop eating bananas altogether, and she'd been mourning that loss for a long time because it used to be her favorite. So we tested it properly. Week 1, she ate a fully ripe yellow spotted banana. Week 2, a green still firm banana, same size, same weight. The difference in her glucose response was honestly one of the most dramatic in the entire experiment. The starch inside a banana physically changes as it ripens. A green banana is loaded with resistant starch, which doesn't get digested in the small intestine the way regular starch does. It passes through to the colon, feeds the gut bacteria, and barely moves blood sugar at all. A ripe banana, that same starch has converted into simple sugars, same fruit, same weight, completely different chemistry happening inside it. Diane's 1-hour reading after the green banana was nearly flat. After the ripe banana, it climbed significantly. So the rule we landed on, slightly green, never fully yellow and spotted, and if you slice it and refrigerate it for a couple hours first, you actually increase the resistant starch even further, the same trick that works with potatoes and rice. Diane told me getting her banana back, even in this new form, felt like getting a small piece of her old routine returned to her. Number 4 was strawberries, and this was actually one of the better performers in the whole test. My patient, I'll call him Walter, 68, ate a full cup after his lunch. His readings barely moved. Strawberries are naturally lower in sugar than most fruit, they're loaded with fiber, and the polyphenols in them seem to genuinely help slow the sugar absorption. Walter's numbers were so stable that I actually had him repeat the test a second week just to make sure I wasn't looking at a fluke, or a day where he'd simply been more active than usual. Same result both times, which made this one of the easiest recommendations to hand out with confidence. Number 3 was oranges, whole, not juiced. My patient, I'll call her Sandra, 65, ate 1 medium orange after her breakfast. Her readings stayed remarkably steady, likely because of the pectin and fiber in the segments and the pith, which most people peel away and throw in the trash without a second thought. The moment you juice an orange, all of that protection disappears, and you're left with what's basically concentrated sugar water dressed up as a health drink. Sandra's numbers when we tested orange juice instead, same sugar content on paper, were dramatically worse, and she told me she'd been drinking a glass every morning for years, thinking it was one of her healthiest habits. Number 2, and this one has become one of my favorite recommendations in the whole practice now, the apple. There's a reason that old saying about an apple a day exists, and for once, I think the science genuinely backs it up, but only if you eat it the right way. The key compound here is pectin, a soluble fiber concentrated mostly in the skin. When pectin hits your stomach, it forms a gel, and that gel physically slows down how fast sugar gets absorbed into your bloodstream, like pouring something thick through a strainer instead of water. My patient, I'll call her Margaret, 72 years old, had been peeling her apples for years because she thought the skin was just extra fiber she didn't need, something her mother had taught her decades ago. When we had her eat the apple whole, skin on, after her protein at lunch, her post-meal spike was noticeably smaller than when she ate the peeled version earlier that same week. Same apple, same sugar. The skin alone made a measurable difference on her own meter, which she found almost hard to believe until she saw it twice. And that brings us to number 1, and this is the result I told you about at the beginning, the one that made me go back and recheck the lab work. Patient number 4 in my full study, I'm going to call her Maria. 68 years old, a 1C of 8.1 when we started, which her endocrinologist had been watching closely for 2 years, gently pushing towards starting insulin at her next visit if things didn't change. Maria didn't want that, not yet. She asked me if there was anything else worth trying first, and honestly, I told her I didn't know if fruit alone could move a number that stubborn after 2 years of slow, steady climbing. But we tried it anyway, because she asked, and because I'd rather try something reasonable than tell a patient there's nothing left to attempt. The fruit was the blueberry. Here's exactly what Maria did, and I want you to notice how simple this is, because there was no extreme diet involved. No elimination of entire food groups, nothing dramatic. Half a cup of blueberries every single morning, eaten after her eggs, not before, not alone. And she cut out fruit juice completely, which she'd been drinking most mornings without really thinking about it, the way most of us drink coffee without questioning it. 8 weeks later, her blood sugar readings had improved so consistently that we rechecked her A1C early, ahead of her scheduled appointment. It came back at 6.3. I had the lab rerun it because I genuinely thought there had been a mix-up, maybe a mislabeled sample, something. It came back the same the second time. Now here's the part that made this click for me scientifically, because I went digging after Maria's numbers came in, wanting to understand what I was actually looking at. Blueberries are unusually low on the glycemic index, sitting around 53, lower than apples, lower than bananas, lower than grapes. They carry close to 4 grams of fiber per cup. But the real story is a compound called anthocyanin, which is what gives blueberries their deep blue color in the first place. When anthocyanins enter your bloodstream, they appear to activate an enzyme called AMPK. Think of it as a master switch inside your cells. When that switch flips on, your cells open up and pull glucose out of the bloodstream to use as energy. Blood sugar comes down, insulin starts working more efficiently, and the effect seems to last for hours, not minutes. There's actual published research behind this, which is part of why Maria's result didn't feel like a fluke to me once I looked into it further. A randomized, placebo-controlled study out of Pennington Biomedical Research Center gave insulin-resistant adults the equivalent of 2 blueberry smoothies a day for 6 weeks, and the blueberry group showed significantly improved insulin sensitivity compared to the placebo group. A separate analysis, pooling 22 different clinical trials, found that blueberry and cranberry intake reduced fasting blood glucose by close to 18 points on average, and lowered A1C by roughly 1/3 of a percentage point in people with type 2 diabetes. For someone sitting just above 7 trying to get under that line, that 1/3 of a point can be the entire difference between 2 very different conversations with their doctor. And here's the practical part I love the most. A 2-pound bag of frozen blueberries costs somewhere around $5 to $7, and a single serving, half a cup, works out to under 50 cents. Frozen actually works just as well as fresh, sometimes better, because they're flash frozen at peak ripeness, which locks in the anthocyanins right at their highest concentration. Maria wasn't doing anything complicated. Half a cup of frozen blueberries mixed into Greek yogurt, eaten after her eggs. That's it, and her A1C dropped from 8.1 to 6.3 in under 3 months. I want to be completely clear about something, because I take this seriously. Maria was still on her prescribed medication the entire time. This wasn't fruit instead of treatment. It was fruit alongside treatment, and her doctor made any medication adjustments, not me, based on her improving numbers. If you're on medication for blood sugar, please don't change anything without talking to your own physician first. What I'm showing you is what happened when we added something on top of her existing care, not a replacement for it, and I think that distinction matters more than almost anything else in this video. Now, before I hand you the actual plan, I have to warn you about something, because a few of my patients in this study almost undid all of their progress without realizing it, and I don't want that happening to you after everything we just walked through. There were 4 specific mistakes I watched undo the benefit completely, even in fruits that should have helped, and I saw at least one of these show up in almost every single patient at some point during the study. Mistake number 1, juicing. The moment you juice any fruit, you strip out the fiber and concentrate the sugar into liquid form. A glass of orange juice can carry over 20 grams of sugar with almost none of the fiber that would have slowed it down. It hits your liver in minutes, not the gradual release you'd get from the whole fruit. I don't care what the label says about no added sugar. The sugar was already there naturally, and juicing just removed the one thing protecting you from it, which honestly feels like the cruelest trick in this whole category. Mistake number 2, blending. Smoothies feel healthy. I understand why people reach for them. They're fast, they're easy, they feel virtuous. But the moment fruit goes into a blender, the fiber matrix gets shredded into pieces too small to form that protective gel in your stomach. Your body absorbs the sugar almost as fast as if you'd had a glass of juice, even though visually it still looks like whole food. One of my patients swapped her whole blueberries for a blueberry smoothie for 1 week just to test it. And her spike was noticeably worse, even though the fruit itself hadn't changed at all, only its form. Mistake number 3, fruit on an empty stomach. This was probably the single biggest driver of bad results across this entire study, more than any specific fruit choice. Fruit eaten alone, first thing in the morning, with nothing else in the stomach, hits the bloodstream with no protein, no fat, and no fiber from a previous course to slow it down. The fix across every single patient was the same, and it never failed once. Protein first, then fruit. Even a few bites of eggs or yogurt beforehand measurably changed the curve, sometimes cutting the spike in half without changing the fruit at all. Mistake number 4, dried fruit, which I already touched on with the raisins, but it's worth repeating because it applies across the board, not just to raisins. Removing the water concentrates the sugar and lets you eat a much larger volume without feeling full because your stomach measures volume more than it measures calories or sugar grams, and the fiber simply can't keep pace with that much sugar packed into that little bit of food. If you're following along and thinking about your own kitchen right now, that's genuinely the whole point of this experiment. I wanted real answers I could hand my patients, not another chart pulled off the internet that may or may not reflect what actually happens in someone's body. And if this kind of real-world testing is useful to you, this is exactly why I'd rather have you subscribed than just watching once, because I'm planning to run this same kind of trial on other food categories next, and I want you seeing those results as they come in, not stumbling across them months later after I've already moved on to something else. So here's the actual plan, based on everything we just walked through, that I'd hand any of my patients starting tomorrow morning. Step 1, breakfast. Half a cup of frozen blueberries mixed into Greek yogurt or eaten right after your eggs. A 2-pound bag from a regular grocery store lasts around 2 weeks at that portion size, so this isn't an expensive habit to start. Step 2, lunch. If you want fruit at lunch, 1 small apple, skin on, eaten after your protein and vegetables, not before, and not as a random snack sitting between meals when your stomach is otherwise empty. Step 3, dinner. No fruit at dinner. That's simply not the window where your body handles sugar most efficiently, based on what I saw across nearly every patient in this study. Save it for earlier in the day when your metabolism is more responsive. Step 4, the timing rule, and this one matters more than which specific fruit you choose, more than almost anything else in this entire video. Never eat fruit completely alone. Always after protein, always as part of a meal, not a standalone snack reached for between meals. Step 5, the portion rule. Half a cup of berries, 1 small apple, 10 grapes, not 50. A few slices of a green banana. These are actual serving sizes, not a bowl, not a bag, a measured amount, and I know that sounds restrictive at first, but every single patient in this study told me it stopped feeling restrictive within about a week, once it became routine rather than something they had to think about. Step 6, variety, because I don't want you eating the exact same thing every single day for the rest of your life, and I don't think that's realistic or sustainable for anyone. Rotate. Blueberries and yogurt one day, strawberries over cottage cheese another day, a small apple with a spoon of almond butter after lunch on a third day. The principle stays constant, low glycemic fruit, after protein, in a measured portion, but the flavors can change as much as you want. Step 7. Elimination. Starting this week, if you have fruit juice in your refrigerator, get rid of it. All of it. Orange juice, apple juice, grape juice, whatever's sitting there. If it comes in a bottle and it's marketed as fruit, it is no longer fruit. It is sugar water wearing a fruit label, and once you see it that way, it's genuinely hard to unsee. Replace it with whole fruit, eaten at the right time, and you'll likely see a difference faster than you expect. That's the entire protocol. 7 steps. And if you want to actually see whether this works for you the way it worked for Maria, track your fasting number every morning starting today before you eat or drink anything. Most of my patients in this study started noticing a shift within the first 3 to 5 days, which is honestly faster than most of them expected going in. I want to say something honestly because I think it matters, and I don't say this kind of thing lightly after 15 years of doing this. I went into this experiment expecting the blueberry result to be modest, maybe a small improvement worth mentioning in passing. I did not expect Maria's number to move that much, that fast, and I still think about that lab report sometimes, sitting in my office rereading it. It's the kind of result that makes you reconsider things you thought you already understood, and it's part of why I keep running these tests, instead of just repeating what I learned years ago and calling it settled. If this video changed how you think about even one fruit in your own kitchen, I'd genuinely love to know which one in the comments. And if you found this useful, sharing it with someone who's been struggling with their numbers costs you nothing and might save them months of confusion. That's honestly the best compliment this kind of video can get, better than any like or comment. I'm already running the next version of this experiment on a different food category entirely, and the early numbers are surprising me again, maybe even more than this one did. If you want to see those results the moment they're ready, make sure you're subscribed because I'll be walking through that one exactly the way I walked through this one. Real patience, real numbers, no guessing, and no shortcuts. Stay curious, stay careful with your own numbers, and I'll see you in the next one.